Hey, Jacob.
Hey, Mike.
How'd
Up?
that feel? Does that feel
that
good?
Felt,
that felt very
great,
organic,
buddy. Yeah. Man,
hey,
you were on it today.
I know. I got a little pep. It's because I came across an old interview of our corporate overlord, Phil, where he was talking a little bit about Voyage. And he mentioned that one of his favorite TV shows growing up was X-Men, the animated series.
No.
Do you have any thoughts on that show?
Yeah. Maybe we should do an episode about it. I mean, this doesn't surprise me that you were stalking Phil late at night, for the record.
No, I'm trying to get us, it's called job security, Jacob. Some of us care about it.
I have a better form of job security for us, okay? And this is $1 million idea, Mike, okay? You know how X-Men have an X in their name? What happened? Yeah, right? Did you notice that? What happens if you take the X?
I call them the St. Andrews Crossmen, but go ahead.
Well, now you're deflating my idea. All right, so no, it's not a cross. That's silly. It's an X. But if you turn the X,
I thought it was the Greek letter
chi.
Am I derailing you?
They're never going to accept our idea if I can't pitch it, Mike. Okay, so the X, you put it on its side, it turns into what? A cross.
Whoa. I thought you were going to say a plus sign.
So my idea for Voyage Comics is a new line called Crossmen, not T-men or plus men, which is what
good anticipation.
People probably are going to read it. But they won't. They'll clearly tell it's cross.
Got to hedge that off early.
Yeah,
right? You got to anticipate that, and yeah,
that's right.
Anyway,
and it's going to be a completely unique team of individuals that just happen to correlate.
Definitely not
to all
derivative.
Your favorite. Yeah, because they're completely different. They're completely different, Mike. Okay, so like for example, in X-Men, you have a character named Rogue, right? But in Crossmen, you have a character named not Rogue, but obedient. Okay.
Oh, what? Like gives the person power? What if you're fighting a bad guy?
She doesn't suck the power from people. She just takes their workload from them and just obediently and meekly does it. And then, like Jubilee, we have a character.
Second.
We didn't have to change her name. So her name will be Jubilee too. But her superpower will be that she can forgive debt every 50 years.
And explaining what Jubilee means, the whole biblical connection, that'll also be part of the superpower
too, right?
But doesn't she have a downside?
The problem with her is that she can only do her superpower every 50 years.
That may be the case, originally, but fortunately in our Catholic Western tradition, Jacob, the Pope can just call a Jubilee whenever he wants, a Jubilee year.
That's very convenient, actually, because I was envisioning the Pope as being the Professor Xavier stand-in. Yeah, so it's like, to me, my Crossmen, and then when Jubilee shows up, he can give her permission to go forgive debts.
Wasn't there one about Gambit?
Yeah, Gambit. What would Gambit do? Gambit. Don't you guys have
he puts the kinetic energy into playing cards, but he'd throw it and he'd be like, Saint Therese of Lisieux, and it'd be like a holy card.
See, it's writing itself.
I was going to say,
writing itself.
Welcome to the Voyage Podcast, a show that traverses the oceans of myth and legend through the lens of Catholic theology and philosophy. Come aboard as we set sail in pursuit of the heroic life and Christian virtue, with your hosts, Mike Schramm and Jacob Platty.
Are you ready? Are you ready to do this with me, Mike?
I don't think we're licensed for that, Jacob. We need to stop now. We're not allowed to. We're gonna get Voyage sued. So
is that the most 90s theme song of all time? Probably.
It might be. Yeah, it might be.
I would have to say so.
It brings you right back.
It does. It gets me amped every time that show starts. It's like, let's get X-Men on.
And it's like, and you're not even that big of a fan, but it's like once you hear the music going.
I will say this: like, I'm not like a huge X-Men fan, but I will say that 90s TV show is definitely top tier 90s cartoon.
how much of this is becoming just a nostalgia factor, Jacob? Because we also said the same thing about Batman, the animated series. That's very much a 90s
But everyone knows Batman the animated series is the greatest cartoon of all time. Like, that's not nostalgia. That's just a known fact, right?
Yeah, you're just swinging a big stick right now. But,
No, the reason why I know it's not just nostalgia is because I did like the X-Men cartoon in the 90s, and I didn't go on to become some kind of big X-Men fan. You know what I mean? So like I like the show on its own merits, and I've been rewatching it because of the old X-Men 97 stuff coming out. And it holds up, dude. It holds up like gangbusters. That's like, I've been pleasantly surprised. It's like, wow, this is
a perfect segue. That is what sort of prompts this episode of the Voyage Podcast. So welcome, Jacob, and welcome back, everybody, to this episode, which is going to be extraordinary and devoted to... Wow. Yeah, it's going to be all over the place. Not just the title. It's going to be everywhere. They're going to be... Yeah. And you know what? And they're not all going to be planned. Some of them are going to be extemporaneous, too.
I'm just excited to get this going.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be excellent. Do I get extra credit? Do I get extra credit for how many...
Let's just get them all out of the way now.
X-puns we can do?
You know how they always show that meter of like when the listening drops off, and it's going to be right at about 2 minutes.
We've just extinguished our audience in real time. Yeah. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, no. You must have these written down, Jacob.
So I'm just...
so yeah, we did a little bit of, a little bit of that nostalgia.
So, I don't know. I'm good at X-puns.
Yeah. Little bit of the 90s nostalgia from our own experiences of watching, and we can kind of go back to it as well, because like you said, you've been kind of brushing up and going back into some of the old ones. I went back into some of the old ones, and have watched some of the new ones too, which we can obviously talk about like specific episodes if we want to go that much into it, but even just making it more character driven, because that's obviously what the X-Men is really all about. Is it's a character driven show. So why don't we jump right into maybe your top 2 favorite X-Men? So like if you had to pick 2
favorite X-Men?
Yeah. I mean, I say 2 because I have 2 written down, so that's why I'm letting you do 2.
Is that because everyone's going to say Wolverine, and so that's obvious? So then we need a second. Character.
I put in the outline besides Wolverine. Come on. It has to be besides Wolverine. So it can be. I would say 2 besides Wolverine, though.
All right, top 2 besides Wolverine.
Although he's not my favorite, but that's,
You know what the problem is that, like, I've been watching the 90s animated TV show, like, and so they're so present in my mind that it's obviously Gambit and Rogue, right? Like,
okay,
those 2 characters are just super cool, especially within the context of that show. But, I'll try to be a little bit more interesting to that. I also like Beast from that show. Beast has always been fun.
I put Gambit as one of mine, so it's fine. Of course you did.
Like, of course you did.
What is that supposed to mean?
Are you not aware that Gambit was just designed to be cool? Like, he was just designed to be like the cool hip character that like everyone's going to gravitate towards. He's got a cool power too.
I guess like he just puts energy into things. Is that like that's
he does? Yeah, and anything he touches, he can turn it into something that's going to explode.
I get like he's the suave,
he's also Cajun. Cajun's fun, and I also, and that's why, because I kind of like grew up. I have 1 foot in the north and 1 foot in the south as far as like my lived experience in America, kind of thing. And so like I've always got an affinity for Southern characters. That's so really the reason why I choose Gambit and Rogue is largely because they're like Southern bayou characters. You have a
legitimate reason, whereas I'm just basic. Is that what
yours is? Like, really basic. Yes, this is. Yeah. I'm not even poking fun at you. You're just being super basic right now.
Whereas yours, but I like him on a much deeper level than you.
I have roots. Yeah, I have roots over here, man.
Are you familiar with that? There is that. It's like one of the most common phrases from the satirical newspaper, The Onion, and it's like one of their headlines was, "I appreciate the Muppets on a much deeper level than you." I think I've teased you about this before. I feel like that's you with like everything that like.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It's like true. You towards me about everything. It's like I appreciate Gambit on a much deeper level than you, whereas I'm just like, I was a child, so he was a cool character, Jacob. Because I was a child. I wasn't like this. I wasn't this proto hipster in the 90s. Who was like trying to.
If there was some character from Wisconsin,
was cool before everybody else.
If there was some character X-Men from Wisconsin you would be like, or southern Minnesota, I guess. You'd be like,
I'm not from either of those places. I grew from
where are you from originally?
St. Paul.
Oh, well, that's southern Minnesota. That's kind of central, I guess. I guess.
No one thinks that is southern Minnesota.
Because southern Minnesota is boring. That's right. I mean, I said it, folks.
Who are you alienating now? Who do you think you're alienating?
If you just wiped out a third of our audience.
There probably, I mean, honestly, there probably is there's got to be some like, country boy X-Men character that we're missing, that we're overlooking, that, you'll get an email about later or something.
You haven't even given your characters yet. You said Gambit, I guess.
Well, I said Gambit was one.
Is the other one going to be Nightcrawler? Were you going to go with
somebody besides Nightcrawler? Was the other? Yeah,
of course, yeah.
What is that? Of course. How is that? Of course now too.
Because he's a Catholic. He's a Catholic mutant.
So is Gambit. So why couldn't that just be my reason for liking Gambit? Yeah. Why couldn't that be my reason?
Gambit? No, I don't. I think we have it on the record that Gambit is kind of an agnostic. Even in the old, season 4 episode that introduces Nightcrawler. One of the most religious cartoon episodes in a non-religious cartoon of all time.
When he becomes a monk, yeah.
Well, like when Nightcrawler is introduced, like he's not in the TV show in the 90s up until that episode. And it's like I'm watching Christian television. It's crazy. I mean, of course, they don't use the word Christ. It's all just like God, which is kind of like the safe thing to do in a multicultural context, I guess. But he's a specifically Catholic monk. And he's a monk. He's like actually a monk,
Well, and I think part of it is it reminds me of the kind of that backstory with Hellboy, who is another popular Catholic comic character too, because it's like he's grappling, he's wrestling with his demons, right? Same thing with Hellboy. Same thing with Nightcrawler, because that's kind of like, obviously he does look like a little demon, like a blue devil. He does, yeah. And so it's that sort of like, it's almost like you have to swing too far, the other, like overcompensate.
I was just giving you a hard time. The reality is Nightcrawler is a super cool character. He is. His powers are super cool. They look super cool.
Well, and I even remember, I think where it's not even so much, because like that wasn't a thought of mine when I watched the TV show as a kid. It's like, oh, which one's the Catholic character?
Right.
And it could be one of those where it's like, like you said with Gambit, where it's like, in he's a wayward youth right now. He's a prodigal son right now, Jacob, but he definitely has that the Catholic roots to him, which is part of that, like you said, that Cajun upbringing. But
are you talking about Gambit? Yeah, Gambit.
I was jumping over to Gambit, but Nightcrawler. Yeah. I remember the arcade game. They had an X-Men arcade game as well. Yeah. And I always wanted to be Nightcrawler because his like special attack was that he would,
hop around.
You'd like hop all over
Jump
the place,
around. Jump around.
I don't know why I can't think of the word. Like I keep thinking transform, but that's not the word.
90s. X-Men 2, X2, the movie from the early 2000s. He had that amazing opening sequence for that movie where he almost assassinates the president. And it's this extended action sequence where he's just like running through the White House, just like dodging Secret Service members.
That
was such. It's one of like the highlights of the entire. I couldn't think of the word
teleportation. But,
is that?
Yeah, that was the word I couldn't think of before. But nah.
Should I try to think of a deeper cut?
Well, doesn't he have a conversation in a church in that X2 movie too?
They do. That's where they find him.
To
because they knew they are trying to find him after they know there's a mutant out there trying to assassinate someone. They don't know who it is, so they use Cerebro to go and locate where this mutant is, and he's in a church. Mm-hmm. It's an old church. I can't remember if it's like under construction or if it's actually just like run down or something like that. But he's hiding in this church praying when they find him, and when they finally do have a conversation with him. There's lots of religious iconography related to that character.
Somebody
even
should draw a picture of like Nightcrawler and Daredevil like in line to go into confession, like they're waiting outside the confessional.
Yeah, right.
That'd be a funny picture. I'd put that up on the wall for sure.
Have you watched all the episodes that have been released so far for X-Men 97?
So as of recording, not the one that just came out like 2 days ago.
But you have seen Nightcrawler return in the 97 episode. Like he's in the last.
Yeah.
Not the most
so
recent one with one higher.
Not this most recent, but the week before, which if we.
Yeah, that was a crazy episode, wasn't it?
Like, I don't know. Are we going to go into spoilers? It was a big. Yeah, it was definitely.
I don't know. We
this
can
is
decide
this
if we're
is
gonna
why I
spoilers.
wanted to talk about Gambit too, because Gambit has. I won't give any more detail. Just that he has a very Jesus-like moment. Because in that episode,
wink.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's discussion that he's gonna like come back from the dead too, which again, wink, wink.
Yeah.
But what I did, it's not just Gambit being sacrificial though, because you know the big Sentinel like thing. It was like the three face. Yeah, but it was a three-face Sentinel, which we've talked about before, is like the three faces of Satan and Dante's Inferno. But yeah, it's in the side, right? And that's also where, because that's how he destroys it, wink, wink, because that's where his energy comes out of.
He tramples down death by death. The method he uses to kill Gambit is the means of its own destruction.
It's like, isn't that just the way, you know?
Who's the, Christian in your writing room, you know?
Yeah, who's sneaking these in there?
He does get that side puncture too. So it's very much like a Spear of Longinus kind of side puncture type thing.
So do you have your cool hipster X-Men character that you're going to bring up, or do you want me to? Because I have one that I can't believe you haven't said yet.
Oh,
there's the.
Go ahead, yeah.
There's the Orthodox character, Colossus.
Oh yeah, the Russian
Colossus.
Guy. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I suppose I needed to, in much the same way. You were required to. I'm going to take your
Orthodox card. Yeah, I'm taking your Orthodox card.
You're required to choose Nightcrawler, and I'm required to use Colossus. Who would win in a fight, Nightcrawler or Colossus?
I mean, could Colossus catch Nightcrawler? That's
that would be his only chance. His only chance would be just to run. I like what they did with Colossus in the Deadpool movies that are probably inappropriate.
The live action?
Yeah, the live action Deadpool movies. He becomes like the conscience of the team, like he's like the virtuous character that's kind of the foil, no pun intended.
Well, and he kind of is in the cartoon series too. He's like
he's virtuous.
He's like the gentle giant though, sort of too, until like unless he needs to be violent or use force, I should say, not necessarily violence. But
I just wonder why they use that character in the Deadpool movies. Because I'm more of a DC fanboy than a Marvel fanboy. And so really the only context I have for most of this is comics, TV and movies, and not the comics. So I'm not sure if there's like some kind of like long history of Colossus and Deadpool or something like that. But he's used to good effect in the movies anyway. So I'm kind of curious if they are pulling from something or if that was like a character they have the rights to, in the
same way that, when people started making such a big deal about Wolverine and Deadpool, and I was just like, oh, okay, should I like know some background to that? Or is it just because they got to get Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman together?
I do think there is a Wolverine Deadpool dynamic. I think they have like a history together. In the same way, I'm pretty sure that Cable from the second Deadpool movie, there's a history between Deadpool and Cable, I believe. So I think that they're going through Deadpool's like classic team-ups in these movies. Of course, I also think they're probably going to try to use this Deadpool and Wolverine movie to bring the X-Men universe more fully into the Marvel universe. Like the 2000s through 2010s.
People have been talking about that basically since Endgame.
Right,
so even before Endgame, probably.
Do it.
So,
it's I recently have been like working my way through watching those movies too, and I gotta say they're not bad. Like they get overshadowed by what like the Marvel Studios did with their Avengers, basically the canon Marvel films kind of thing. So I
think it's kind of the antidote to when people are getting sick of how big Marvel was getting, where it's like, oh, so everything has to be saving the world or saving the universe now, whereas like now getting to kind of do some of these smaller.
There's some of those. There's some of those in the X-Men movies too. They save the world moments or whatever, and not all of them are that great either.
I guess if you're talking like the older, like Bryan Singer ones, like the
Bryan
X2
Singer.
and
No, because it's actually still all one continuity. So there's the original
they
trilogy.
Bring it all together, yeah.
And then when they do the prequel movies that kind of bleed into the modern quote unquote movies that have like Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, things like that. That's all one continuity still. There's a little bit of like a soft reboot, I think, with the prequel Days of Future Past. And I've never gotten around to Googling this, so I'm not sure how, because I guess spoiler alert, for a really old movie at this point, Professor X dies in X-Men: The Last Stand. The third of the original trilogy. Well, he gets killed by Jean Grey. And then in Days of Future Past, which is the second of like the prequel reboot, he's just back. Like old Patrick Stewart, Professor X, is just like alive again. Well, and I'm not sure how.
Then he's also in the, how they did all those like individual Wolverine movies?
Yeah, the Wolverine movies.
So like Logan, which is like supposed to be like the last one, which is kind of supposed to be the ending of like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine too, until he comes back now in Deadpool. It sort of was. It was like he dies in that one too. Patrick Stewart, Professor X dies in that one.
Well, again, and that actually makes that would be fine so far as I understand the continuity of these movies, because like I don't know how he comes back from Jean Grey killing him in X-Men: The Last Stand, but he is back by the time Days of Future Past, which is in the same timeline. There's a future, and him and Magneto are trying to like stop apocalypse, like the apocalypse, not the character apocalypse, but just like the end of like the world kind of thing. And they send Wolverine's consciousness back into his young body, and that's the events of that movie. I don't know where Patrick Stewart came from, because last time I checked, he was dead from Jean Grey, right? And they just kind of like don't address that. He's just like alive again. When he dies again in Logan, that's new timeline. That's like that's all post like the prequel, the preview, First Class series. Let's just call it that. So he's already alive again. Like I'm okay with him being alive again and then dying again by that point. But I don't know. Someone explain to me where he came from.
Careful what you wish for, Jacob.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But Logan's a good movie, though. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
he really is the coolest character.
That one I actually just kind of because I grew up with the first couple live action X-Men movies, and I've seen those a couple of times each. And then I was just kind of like, okay, I was just sort of done with superhero movies for a while anyway. So when a lot of those like individual Hugh Jackman Wolverine movies come out, it was just like, well, I didn't see any of those. But then, when Logan finally did, and I had heard some good things, like, critically acclaimed, and trying to go back into the kind of the character driven sort of aspect of it. So then I watched that one and didn't really get any sort of context to it. I just watched it. But
it acts like a standalone. It feels like a standalone film.
I think it was supposed to be, yeah.
That's based on that whole movie. I think came about because there was a super popular run in the X-Men comics that was called Old Man Logan, and it's a fast forward in the future, and pretty much everyone's dead except for Hawkeye and Logan, and they have to go across post-apocalyptic America, like Mad Max style, and try to do something. I haven't actually gotten around to reading it, so I don't know what it's about. But it was like super popular. And, that Old Man Logan character was basically the inspiration for Logan in that movie. And it's also kind of a road trip. So I feel like they're drawing a lot of stuff from that comic. I know that comic has a bunch of inbred Hulks. Like Hulk, Bruce Banner has become a tribe of Hulks. And it's all like, it's dark. It's a dark comic. I don't know. Maybe I should know.
I don't want to go down that one.
There's lots of Hawkeye is blind. Everyone loved it because it was just like such a dark take on the future. But like,
Hawkeye being blind is just that perfect ironic twist.
It is. Yeah. It's like, of course he is. Yeah. I'm gonna have to read it sometime though.
He could smell his targets maybe and hit his targets by smell. He can
probably just kind of like Daredevil it. Kind of makes Daredevil feel less special if just like anyone can just like tune in to their environment like that. But I don't know.
These are really good ruminations. We should keep doing this. So we've touched on this a little bit. I wanted to,
Catholicism and Orthodoxy in the X-Men. We've already gone over, Gambit and Gambit's very Christ-like sacrifice in the newish or most recent 97 episode as of this recording. I know the season's still coming out. Colossus, which, you'll find on some if you just like search, because I always thought that he was Orthodox. Then you'll find on some that, he was atheist, communist, because that's the
like
context
Soviet
that he was raised in or whatever. But that's kind of similar to just assuming that somebody's Catholic because they're Irish too. I think I feel like it leads itself, and you'll see on some wiki sites. You'll see on some wiki sites that he is actually listed as Orthodox Christian. So I don't know if, like, depending on which property you're kind of following.
Sure.
Nightcrawler, joins the monastery. We talked about him.
And I kind of wonder, having recently watched the animated 92 series, season 4 is when Nightcrawler shows up in that. For one, let's just pause and say that's such a cool episode as such, because it's like a little horror movie episode. It's a little cartoon horror movie episode. It's all very gothic and lightning striking and things like that. And Rogue and Gambit and Wolverine are on a vacation in the Alps, going skiing because Scooby-Doo style, you just have to get the characters somewhere.
It's just
they drove up in their mystery machine, and now they're going to solve the case of the Blue Devil in the monastery. But in that whole episode, it's, again, this is like the most Christian, piece of secular entertainment I've ever seen, because Nightcrawler is unabashedly just like open with his faith. And
he gives spiritual direction to Wolverine, I think.
He does. The whole conversation is like Wolverine's like, I can't handle, God's not there for me. Where was God when all this bad stuff happened? And
it's like, never heard that before.
Yeah, and Nightcrawler's like, you've got to have faith. And I'm pretty good with these X-Men 92 voices, I think. But anyway, he has that conversation with Storm in X2. And so I feel like they were kind of like lifting that story. And I mean, a lot of those stories are in the old 90s cartoon are lifted from the comics. Like, it was a really, really faithful comic adaptation for the time.
They just maybe switched out a character or two to
kind of makes me wonder if there wasn't Nightcrawler's introduction to the comics was very similar to how it was depicted in the cartoon. In that comic, that whole comic was about like Wolverine needing his faith restored or something like that. But
he's always been the picture of cynicism, right? And like,
I mean, come on, lighten up, bro. So what if you've had 150 years of
lighten up,
nonstop betrayal? Lighten up, bub.
So I think this is what first sort of prompted, other than, I mean, we both knew that the series was coming out and we were like, oh yeah, nostalgia. But I was thinking about this idea of like, this seems too coincidental to be a coincidence, that Charles Xavier, both of his names, now Charles is a very common name, which is fine, but the fact that it sort of fits a little bit with his character and what he does, and then the Xavier part, which, I mean, you'll sometimes see pronounced Xavier, but it resonates with two different Catholic saints. And so this is one of the things that I thought it's suspiciously Catholic is what I refer to it as. So,
did you coin that word? Is that a new word?
I wish.
Catholic. Yeah. Okay. All right. That sounded too good for you to have made up.
So the first name, Charles, again, I know it's a common name, but Charles Borromeo, he was a bishop and a cardinal in the kind of Renaissance, sort of the Reformation time of the church. But he was known for reforming the seminaries, which what are the seminaries known for but forming young men for the priesthood. And so now you have, what is Charles Xavier and his school? It's a vocational school for these extraordinary young people, right? Which is they would have considered, especially
youngsters.
Especially
for gifted youngsters.
Back in the time of, St. Charles Borromeo, they would have seen the call to the priesthood as an especially extraordinary vocation in relationship to the vocation of marriage. And so I thought, isn't that interesting that you have the guy who was known for reforming the seminary process, And we have sort of kept that model since Charles Borromeo. He also wrote the standardized catechism around that time too. So he's known for like as this spiritual father, spiritual teacher. And so then we have Charles Xavier, who starts the school. But then you also have the second half, Xavier, which I don't know if there was ever anybody by this name who would go by this name, but you see it now a lot more often. But it's named after St. Francis Xavier. Okay. Sure. And he was another, I think it was 1500s, 1600s Jesuit priest who he traveled like as far out as any priest, as more than any other priest had before him, to go to these mysterious parts of the world, all the way to the Orient, Jacob, all the way to the different parts of Asia. And he would evangelize the peoples of, that sort of like East Asian countries.
Did he also have a giant, like, Epcot-centered golf ball dome that he could, like, put a helmet on and, like, identify the pagans and figure out who was most likely to convert, maybe, We haven't dug all of the different tunnels out of the Vatican yet, so maybe we'll find one. Maybe that's what we'll find. If anyone has a cerebro-like apparatus, it's the Vatican.
It would be, the basement of the Vatican. So if we find that will just confirm it all the more. The fact that the creators of X-Men knew that, now that's a different story. Yeah. But the fact that he travels to...
Wow. I mean, I'm from Missouri, and we're kind of like meth
you're
state.
Ozark.
So,
you're Ozark world or something.
If anywhere's meth city, it's got to be in Missouri somewhere. Just saying. Hey, don't hate. I'm from Missouri, folks. Come on. Like, you know what I'm telling you. You know what I'm saying. You know I'm right.
That's fine. That's fine. So I mean, we haven't even we didn't actually go through specifically like some of the, because I said one of the fun things about it is you get to see all these different, it's sort of like the creative writing project in school where it's like, if you could have any superpower, what could it be? And you get 50 different answers and you get to see all of those on display. Sometimes as sort of competing forces in the X-Men. You sort of addressed the, good questions of how to address injustice. You have the MLK versus Malcolm X paradigm in terms of how you approach both of those, which it doesn't even, I mean, obviously it does sort of lean you towards one way or the other because Charles Xavier is always the classic good guy, whereas Magneto was always seen as, he's always
complicated.
But that's just it, is especially in this new 97 iteration, we dived right into that more nuanced, complicated look at that approach. And so he's not unless he's going to reveal himself as some really big bad guy later, like he's very much the good guy.
Let me just say, I'm going to roll with it. But is that how you get yourself, what's the word when you're let off the hook for your crimes? When you're absolved,
exonerated or whatever.
Exonerated, yeah. X, another X word. Is that how you get exonerated, by like saving the life of the judge? Because I'm pretty sure Magneto's a global terrorist, and he's on trial. He's on trial, and he saves everyone's life, and then the judges are like, well, because he saved our lives, we're going to exonerate him. It's like, that feels a bit self-serving. And a little bit not like justice.
And it also could be like, wait, could Magneto have orchestrated that in order to set himself up?
Maybe it's like, hey, all I have to do is...
That almost encourages the sort of thing, doesn't it?
Fake an attack on the judge and then save his life, then I'm going to get off the hook. You know what I mean? Is that justice? Is that justice?
I almost wanted somebody to like point to a calendar and so that it would have a certain date on it when that happened, because you knew that there was definitely an analog in that scene.
Well, and the only other thing I'll add to it is that there was the United Nations anyway, so there was like never any risk of anything bad happening to him. I'm just gonna say it. So he probably wasn't. He was less exonerated than just like United Nations like shrugged its shoulders and was like, "Hey, we have no power anyway." Like. We're just going to
public opinion that he,
if we tried to punish you, it wouldn't work anyway. So we're just going to choose to exonerate you, and we both save face. That was, I'm pretty sure, what happened in that episode.
Very cynical of you, Jacob.
So it was very expedient of them.
All right.
Yes.
So
nice, right?
And this kind of does lead into like the big thing, that the X-Men doesn't do well is it can oftentimes get very preachy, right? Borderline propagandistic.
I'll definitely put my cards on the table here. The one thing that's always held me a little bit removed from X-Men is that basically it's a 100% stand-in for just a persecuted minority, right? Like 100%. That's exactly what it's about. And there's plenty of good stories. In fact, I've really enjoyed a whole lot of the stories that I've engaged with when it comes to X-Men. And I am starting to get into the comics now. I'm starting to like go back through, pick up old storylines, and expose myself to them. And they're great. It's actually it's a great comic line. But yeah, it's preachy, and we all know what you're talking about, X-Men.
And it's almost too easy to like kind of shuffle in whatever your kind of like group du jour is of like who you want it to who are the X-Men going to represent this decade, who are the X-Men going to represent
and they do era. Nowadays the X-Men really feels like it's hammering home something that I think is actually much more nuanced, and we really have to really think our way through exactly what it is we're supposed to accept and what it is we're supposed to reject, because if you are operating on the standards of the X-Men storylines, there's either full acceptance, like you 100% support this, or you're a villainous bigot. You know what I mean? That's the world of the X-Men because of the sympathetic portrayal of that storyline. Mutants, who mutants are and what they do. I guess I could see, this is where I would actually start to get me in trouble if I was to say, like, a lot of the people who are afraid of mutants in the X-Men universe are legitimately afraid of the fact that these people can literally destroy reality as we know it. Yeah. And so there is the question of like, what do you do with someone who can destroy your entire way of life, your entire reality and things like that, right? So I'll leave it at that.
Well, and that it is a sort of fitting parallel, isn't it? I mean, that's sort of what you're tipping your cap to.
It kind of becomes a thing.
So it's like, so basically you're on the side of the bad guys, and we'll move on. So,
so I guess I am. I guess I'm a bad guy.
I can't remember the bad guy's name. The one who builds all the Sentinels now. I'm blanking on it.
Trask?
Yeah.
Oliver Trask.
So
that's
maybe somebody will come from the future and help change your mind or convince you. Oh, I didn't even mention, but what's one of the X-Men's literal name is Bishop. So it's like,
that's true.
So yeah, we didn't even. I mean, he doesn't like give any sort of like Catholic imagery or whatever, but his name is Bishop. So I can't believe I didn't think of like find more stuff in that. So at the risk of monopolizing the conversation a little bit, there is something. Well, no, you'll be able to jump in on this stuff too, Jacob. So as you've sort of mentioned, and Mr. Sinister kind of alludes to this a little bit, right? Because he's, like you said, he's trying to almost like create for him, like by himself, this kind of mutant messiah, right? And we've already talked about how, the whole X-Men idea is based off of the idea of evolution and how that's like the next stage of evolution. Well, this is, I mean, obviously they weren't thinking of this when this is the case, but about 100 years ago, there were these two. So we've already talked about Henri Bergson, who was a French Jewish philosopher. We talked about him when we were talking about like the theory of laughter and humor and stuff. Okay, but he had a book called Creative Evolution, which, I mean, we're not going to get too far into that right now, but along with him, there was this priest and paleontologist, and he's somewhat controversial in like Catholic circles, like theological circles, but his name was Father Teilhard de Chardin. Okay. And he, by the way, was a Jesuit also, Jacob.
I believe it.
Which won't surprise which won't surprise anybody when I say that he was controversial, or anybody who, like, says knows some of the some of the baggage that goes along with that.
I should have said so. Another Jesuit when you said that, but
of course, but sort of synthesizing his work in theology and his work in paleontology is. He sort of like saw this connection with evolution. And obviously when it came to human development, now he wasn't like proposing that, in 500 years, there's going to be X-Men or whatever, but he did write this book called The Omega Point. And he sort of related the idea of like when we evolve physically, right? We sort of develop these ideas to be able to kind of have the capacity to think more abstractly, and you can even see it in terms of our individual development from like a child to a teenager to an adult or whatever. And you can almost like extend that to like as a species. When it comes to we've sort of been able to develop what we know about the world, right? More than we have 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. And I don't just mean technologically. And, you know, people can always say the thing, oh, we know less about ourselves than we did 500 years. And that's no, because we still have all that stuff from 500 or 1,000 years ago too. Like, even though people don't read Aristotle, we still have the stuff of Aristotle, and like academically, we can still build on it, right? Or Thomas Aquinas or whatever it is.
Just one of my favorite Chesterton quotes is progress does not mean moving past where you were. It means adding to what you already have, to paraphrase it.
And it's the whole standing on the shoulders of giants thing, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the same idea.
We add to our knowledge. We don't change our knowledge. You know what I mean? So anyway.
And you and I have had a lot of conversations how not just when it comes to like human development, but theological development, because we've had a lot of conversations about the development of doctrine, right?
Sure.
And how like we can
I believe in eternal timeless truths. You believe in making it up as you go.
Okay,
really agree to disagree. You know, I get it.
So this idea that, you know, and how we've been given the deposit of faith, right, by Jesus and the apostles 2,000 years ago, but there's been a continual unfolding of that, and part of that has to do with the relationship that the church has with the sciences or the knowledge of the world, and how it sort of brings about that unfolding. And in the same way that we as individuals are called towards deification, right, ultimately found in Christ, well, the church, and not just the human members of the church, but the church, like as a body, is called to that same thing. And part of that deification process is actually the development of doctrine, right? It's part of like, we're better understanding who Christ is over the course of these 2,000 years.
Yeah,
right?
That's
and part
true.
of it has to do with us going back
any classical Christian, right, can absolutely acknowledge that as questions arise, the answers that are given to those questions, oftentimes they need to be developed. They need to be manifested. You know, like a question that didn't exist about whatever, you know, genetic manipulation or something like that. Some kind of 21st century question, you know, like how are we supposed to address that as Christians? This is not a question that Christians needed to ask themselves 1,000 years ago. And so oftentimes the development of doctrine as such is, you know, to use that language, is just answering questions as they arise, right? It's not replacing prior knowledge. It is bolstering prior knowledge. It is applying prior knowledge to new concepts that we have to think about.
I'd piggyback on that, because a lot of times when people bring up something like, oh yeah, you know, Jesus and the apostles could have never known about these sorts of questions 2,000 years ago. Usually it's brought up in the context of moral theology, like, oh, well, they could have never told us what the right answer would have been when it comes to genetic manipulation or the atomic bomb, or, you know, atomic energy, atomic weapons. And it's usually, like I said, brought up in the context of morality. But I would argue that take that development the next step and say that it doesn't have to just be applied to questions of morality, right? And so even something like what Teilhard de Chardin was talking about is, you know, we didn't have the language of evolution 2,000 years ago, right? And so now we can apply, thanks to, I mean, in some ways, biological sciences, in some ways, you know, even despite the non-Christian or anti-Christian developments that have been made in those areas, that language can still help us when it comes to understanding, you know, like I said, for both of us, one of the most central doctrines of Christianity is deification, is the idea that God became man so that man could become like God. And so now we have, like I said, using some of this biological language to help us kind of bring about that understanding too.
Well, and, you know, one of the things that's also useful is just acknowledging that a lot of what we experience in modern science and things like that, or the evolution of, understanding of the universe and things like that, you'd be surprised. I've been surprised at how easy it is to hold that next to what the church fathers say and not have to jump through hoops, right? No. Like, basically, classical Christians, and I have plenty of classical Christian friends, Orthodox friends, Catholic friends, I suppose. I had more conversations with Orthodox friends, at least in this line, that some of, there are people who are 7-day creationists that reject evolution that I'm good friends with, and then there are people who don't, right? So I'm not saying that the Orthodox Church hasn't said one or the other. The Catholic Church hasn't necessitated one or the other, I don't believe. And so it's whatever, we can talk about that. But let's say that you do, and I go along with evolution. It just seems to be the way it is, right? I consider myself basically an agnostic when it comes to these types of questions. But 100%, if evolution really does seem to be the case, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and assume it's true. And when I sit there, I don't really have to, pretzel up and try to make that work somehow, right? It's surprisingly easy. The church doesn't mandate anything.
It's not that we're so good at compromising. It's that we don't even feel like it's a compromise. And that's
exactly.
the important kind of, perspective when it comes to that.
Excellent point.
No, I don't know. Hey, you used that one already.
Oh, yeah, I did. Excellent's too easy.
Well,
thanks for extricating that for me, Mike.
You're the one who does the editing, so. So to that end, so this is kind of my last, in our last 5 minutes or whatever. This is the fun stuff for me. The X-Men, they're tangents of deification, and I don't think I'd be the first one to do this, because I think I've seen before in the past, people have either written a chapter in a book or written a blog post about how Aquinas writes about superheroes, and they're like, what? Aquinas about superheroes? But it's because when Aquinas goes through, he kind of lists through the characteristics of the resurrected body. And obviously he uses Jesus in the Gospels as the example, but that's supposed to be the model for us in our own resurrection. Sure. And so you could apply those same things, obviously, when it comes to the powers or the evolution of the X-Men, right?
Yeah, the spiritual body, whatever that is.
I think I put in here that it was X-Ploitated by Aquinas. So, yeah.
There you go.
So, so the first one...
He examined it closely.
So, and you can find all these in the... So Aquinas' Summa Theologiae is broken up into 3 parts. First part is dedicated to God. Second part is dedicated to humanity. The third part is dedicated to the link between God and humanity, who is Jesus. And so it's in this third part. Now, technically, it's in the supplement part because Aquinas didn't finish the third part. So these things were put together by his students from sort of his other writings and notes and things like that. But he covers it in questions 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, and all the way to 85. So 79 to 85. But the different characteristics, the first one would be identity, just that we retain who we are. Now, that's kind of a tricky one. I mean, maybe you kind of see that a little bit in Mystique or Morph, right? Where they can change their whatever appearance and stuff, but they retain who they are. But it's also, if you could sort of see this played out from when our species goes from non-X-Men to X-Men, right? This is kind of an important point that Xavier and Magneto make, which is that they're still human, right? And that's always one of the big sticking points, is that the X-Men are treated as inhuman,
right?
And so, so they're in the next one.
What is their genus is Homo superior, I think. I don't know if that's just what they call themselves, or I'm pretty sure that's a thing. And I don't know if they just
that would get you in trouble if you did that. Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm not making it up. I'm pretty sure that it's regular humans are Homo sapiens, and then the mutant organism is Homo superior, but they're the human family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder the Homo sapiens are a little
that'd make you a little salty. That'd make you a little salty, to be fair.
Yeah.
the next one is that it's integrity, right? And that all the pieces sort of hold together. And this is integrity when it comes to like everything fits according to the whole. And so this is where, like you said, when you said spiritual bodies, that right now, sometimes our bodies don't cooperate with our souls. They don't cooperate with our minds. They don't, in a sense, seek after the things that we should want. But when we have a spiritual body with integrity, there will be this conformity, right? It will kind of go together. Next one, quality, which this is where it gets are like angels in heaven. And so this is the kind of the spiritual bodies thing you're talking about too.
Yeah, like our material qualities, things like that, like the new body. Sure.
Impassibility. So this is the, not so much impassible, like no change at all, but it won't become weakened in that one.
We'll lose our mortality. Is that it?
So, and so like that's where, I don't know, I think of Colossus when like his armor gets on or whatever, where it's that sort of indestructibility. But we retain, and this is the next one Aquinas says, is subtlety. That so like, the line that Aquinas quotes from is from Luke chapter 24, where he says, "See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see. Spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And so it's this, it's, I guess we're still going to do like what humans do, right? Still have that. And then the next one is agility. And the main example that Aquinas uses.
He really does have a big old list of these, doesn't he?
I think it was 7 total. So what am I on? 6 right now? Agility. He uses Jesus moving through the locked doors in John chapter 20, where again it's that power.
Like Nightcrawler.
So there you go. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And finally, Jacob, and this is probably the most like deification is clarity, which I think is significant because this is also the characteristic of beauty that Aquinas has when he breaks down beauty into proportion, integrity, and clarity. And he uses the transfiguration as his example, where his face shines like the sun, where it's like that glory of God is now shining through. And, you kind of, not that you're going to, like when the power is emanating from various X-Men characters, I think Gambit might be a good example, but it is almost like a halo, right? It's that beam of energy or beam of light.
Yeah. How do you demonstrate power in any type of comic or animation medium? Is you go Super Saiyan, right? Like you get the glow. That's how you know something fancy's happening, right? Yeah. So transfiguration. Mm-hmm. That's where my head's been at most of this time. Is transfiguration is what the kind of mutant evolution can be a standard for. It can be this type of more perfect, or perfected state kind of thing, or at least like the next state. I think the analogy breaks down a little bit, but for the most part, if we're just kind of like using it as a loose analogy, I think that ultimately the themes of X-Men at their best are about transfiguring humanity, are about bringing in a more powerful, more potent engagement with the world, and actually evolving ourselves, actually, transforming. This is why transfigure is such a good word, is because it's kind of synonymous with transform, but it's a little different, right? Like transfigure doesn't mean like that you're changing something entirely. If your form changed, you wouldn't be human anymore, and that'd be the issue. Right. So transfigure is in a lot of what the whole seat of the word conversation that we always have in these episodes, and why we're going through society and pop culture and looking at these things is not to do some kind of cheap transformation into it's a Christian story kind of thing. It's about trying to transfigure our experiences of the world, of primarily American culture, but trying to transfigure it, trying to find the grace in it. You know what I mean? Well, and hopefully change our experience of it in a transfigured sense, because we can now use it to remind us
organic
of Christ.
From the inside out. And that's why we use the seed of the word analogy. The seed, transfigures from the inside out to the plant, but it also fits with the X-Men too, because the whole idea is that this wasn't like radiation from space, right? It's that it's the evolution from the inside out. And so that's how grace operates. Grace is supposed to, it's supposed to kind of have that organic process of working from the inside and bringing it out of us too.
I actually do think that it was kind of like an added atomic age kind of thing. Like the reason why it's happening now is because of like atomic radiation and stuff like that.
Oh, does it come up in that?
I'll give it
like
to
that's
you.
what activates it?
I think, the reason why I think it's a response. Basically, because, you know, it was all created in the 60s. It's still, like, it's basically a Cold War response. You know, like, mutation. They're mutants. You know, this is our through line to last time's Godzilla
and
episode.
I was thinking more like the, you know, like the radiation from Fantastic Four, like from the external, like out from the outside. But,
I get you, though. No one thinks about them as, like, atom age characters anymore, right? They've completely evolved, if you will, past that whole construct, and it really is just kind of like it's just evolution, you know. In the movies, Patrick Stewart's Xavier is like, "Agreed. Once in a while, evolution takes a giant leap forward," and that's just like where they leave it. No atomics required. So anyway. Any other voices you want me to do?
I don't know. I'll just kind of leave you to it. Yeah. Thanks, Jacob, for I mean, I look forward to the rest of the season, to be honest. We'll see what direction it goes in. But
it's it's been a really good show. Yeah,
but thank you guys for joining us for this episode, and just another encouragement to like, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, positive review of the show, and that just kind of gets us out there more, and I don't know, allows Jacob and I to justify all of the extra time that we take getting these episodes together.
Thanks for listening to Voyage Podcast. The Voyage Podcast is a production of Voyage Comics and Publishing, which seeks to create exceptional entertainment informed by Catholic values that inspire people to live a heroic life. Voyage Comics seeks to advance truth and beauty found in powerful stories. To learn more, visit voyagecomics.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.